Spillover is the process of fish that normally live inside of a marine protected area and are thus protected from any fishing pressure, from time to time moving outside of those protections afforded by the reserve. When they move outside of those protections, they're then subject to legal fishing. Presumably because they've been inside that protected area for a long period of time, they've been allowed to grow big and large, and therefore they're moving big, large, trophy-sized fishes outside of the protected area.
Spillover is a concept that I think is stronger in some areas versus others. It really just depends on the habitat. And we know that the marine protected areas have been developed to protect what is pretty good habitat, and the fish know that. So I think that spillover does exist in certain circumstances. In my experience, yeah, you can successfully fish a boundary of a marine protected area, and some boundaries work better than others.
Many labs up and down the coast of California have done work to look at fish moving. And that's an important piece of research because it allows us to say how fish are moving in relation to the boundaries of protected areas. From our work down here, for instance, we've looked at the movements of important recreational fishes like kelp bass, barred sand bass, and different species of rockfish. All of those move to a lesser or greater extent. When those fish move large distances, they move outside of the protected areas. And we know this is true because we've had tags in these fish, both visual tags and acoustic tags. Some fish, like barred sand bass, several of which have moved all the way from the South La Jolla Marine Reserve up to off the coast of LA. So some fish are moving very large distances.
In our case here, the Laguna Beach Marine Protected Area is an extensive network of state marine reserve, state marine conservation area, and it's got some really good habitat. So the fish do like to stay there, but of course you're gonna have fish that are gonna cross the line, and of course you're gonna end up fishing the line because in some ways you don't have any choice. In other ways, it does make sense because the fish are gonna cross boundary, and you do want to position as close as you can to that really good habitat.
Does spillover take time? The short answer is no. It takes no time at all. Fish are constantly moving. Some proportion of the fish inside of protected areas, by definition, will move outside of the protected area. But right after a protected area is established, fishermen aren't going to notice the difference between fish caught inside versus fish that have always lived outside of a protected area because they're the same size. You give it about 7 years, 10 years, now fish that big have grown to that big. And when that size fish wanders outside of a protected area, the angler's going to know it. Counterintuitively, the fish that are going to benefit anglers the most in terms of spillover are the ones that are typically homebodies. Kelp bass, barred sand bass, certain species of rockfish. A lot of those individuals don't move much day to day, but some portion of them do. Because they don't move much day to day, they grow larger and larger year over year inside of the protected areas until they finally wander outside of the boundary of the protected areas.
Fishermen aren't scientists, right? Fishermen can only provide anecdotal observations, which are pretty important, you know. Obviously we have fisheries scientists that are out there doing line transects, they're doing surveys, that they are drawing on data from recreational fishermen. But recreational fishermen hopefully can be engaged with and part of the process in reviewing the effectiveness of MPAs.
One of the best ways to tell whether or not spillover is working is to look at where anglers are, to look at where the fishermen are. Where are they putting their boats? If they're consistently putting their boats on the boundary of those protected areas, they're doing it for a reason. So if you see people fishing the line, regularly boats lined up around the protected areas, it's pretty good evidence to suggest that those protected areas are working, both in terms of protecting fish and spilling over individuals for those anglers to catch.
We want to work in conjunction with the scientists to develop concepts that are fair. And fishermen, I believe, have a lot to offer. As we're reviewing the effectiveness of MPAs, we're going over a 10-year review. Hopefully fishermen are engaging, they're being asked to engage with scientists, and they're being cooperative with scientists because ultimately they have a lot to contribute.